Everybody, welcome to episode 18 of the CFL Trade Tree. My name is Robert Dalton, co-host of the Rouge Radio podcast. And before we continue, please make sure to hit like and subscribe below to make sure that all the content that we put forth will get automatically to your YouTube account. Now, I've already recorded this trade tree, but I felt like I needed to re-record because there was something that happened last night. It was the first game in 620 days. Going to IG Field. This isn't a game to boast about the result. This is just to show how much it meant to me and to other CFL fans alike. This, with the banner raising, the return to somewhat normalcy, it felt great. There's a lot of words to describe it, and to everybody at IG Field, from the event staff who made everything so seamless as much as they could, and to all the Bomber fans who put forth their time to get double vaxxed, in time to enjoy this, to make sure that everybody around them was as safe as possible. Now, get that all gooey motion. Let's get to this week's video and show you how the Hamilton Tiger Cats took a star defensive lineman and turned it into two national receivers. In 2012, the Hamilton Tiger Cats signed a guy by the name of Brandon Boudreaux out of college. And just like any normal American player coming out of college, you don't pace yourself because it's different going from a 10-game season to an 18-game season. Brandon Boudreaux came out like a rocket launcher, and 4 sacks in the first 5 games, a potential all-star, and not necessarily tailed off, it just wasn't keeping the pace, which I guess is kind of tailing off. There's a popular misconception among CFL players coming up north from the U.S., especially if you had a high college career or even some kind of NFL experience, that if you're good in your first year, that automatically labels yourself for a potential lifetime CFL career. Now, there is exceptions to that rule, obviously, because there's the likes of non-quarterbacks like Bill Stiegel, G. Simon, Simone Lawrence, Brandon Banks, but the majority, because there's a lot of them coming up north, the majority of them, their life expectancy is about 3, maybe 4 years. And the Hamilton Tiger Cats said, we're making sure that that's the rule. That's the rule, so we're going to make a trade. And in 2014, the Hamilton Tiger Cats made a trade with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. The Saskatchewan Roughriders get Brandon Boudreaux and 2 4th-round picks, one in 2015 and one in 2016. On the other side, the Hamilton Tiger Cats get 2 3rd-round picks, one in 2015 and one in 2016. Now, on the Saskatchewan side of things, because this is about Hamilton, we're starting on the Saskatchewan side of things. Well, because A, it's about Hamilton, and B, the Saskatchewan side is really quick. But what I like about this, and this is probably one of the most positive things that we'll say about the Saskatchewan side of things here, is they made this trade kind of span over 3 years, because you get the production from a roster player that year, you get a draft pick from the next year, and the draft pick from the year after that. Now, will it work out? Well, let's stay tuned. Brandon Boudreaux came onto the scene in Saskatchewan and wasn't lining up, but he was just a cog in the wheel. Very successful production, but his time in Riderville wasn't as long as he would have expected. Signed on with the Calgary Stampeders through free agency. That branch is done. That 2015 4th-round pick was used to select fullback Matthew Rea, and it was okay. It was a very good special teams guy. Saskatchewan Roughrider fans, and most, notably hardcore CFL fans, will only remember him for one play.
First to goal, they fake the fly sweep, he'll throw, and incomplete.
41, he left as a free agent, signed on with the Edmonton Elks, was actually stayed on the practice roster, and hasn't played since. Alright, so we know what we got in 2014 and 2015 from the Saskatchewan Roughriders. What about that 2016 4th-round pick? That was used to select defensive lineman David Onyemata. Now, There's two ways that you can look about this pick, and none of them are really good. I mean, the positive thing is they still hold his rights, so that's right. A trade that happened in 2014 for Saskatchewan still holds somewhat of relevance in 2021. Will that eventually play out? No, probably not. David Onyemata has just restructured his contract to remain with New Orleans in the NFL for a long period of time, and that might not be a sure thing, but these chances are he's not coming out. But the other thing that you might want to take a look at this is that at the time when the pick was made, Saskatchewan didn't have good national depth, so they took a gamble on a guy that they knew that wasn't going to come. Now, it's normal to make draft selections on NFL guys, take a waiver on them because you hold their rights. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But usually those kind of picks are helped for teams with good depth, and Saskatchewan didn't have it. Now, we can look back at it and say hindsight 2020 because they didn't need it, because now they have a decent amount of depth. Well, last year they did. Now, this year, not so much. But I digress. We're not talking about that. But the one positive thing, I guess the second positive thing in this video that we're saying about the Saskatchewan Roughriders is this trade tree still, it's not over for Saskatchewan. Technically, it still exists. But as far as this video go, it's over on our side. Let's go to the Hamilton Tiger Cats side. The Hamilton Tiger Cats, with their third round pick in 2016, select Mike Jones. Now, we're talking about two Mike Jones here. First, as Tiger Cats fans call him, Jones. And yes, that's the first time I'm going to swear. Good thing I beeped it out. But it's a good nickname, huh? I mean, did I do it right? Did I? Doesn't matter. Mike Jones, in his 4 years with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, amassed over 100 catches, over 1,000 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And you're thinking, why is that such a big deal? Well, A, Hamilton sucked in the first 2 years. And in the last 2 years, while he was with Hamilton, they had a stacked receiving core. Gents, if you're putting up record-type numbers in Hamilton's offense in the last 2 years, I'd be talking great about you too. But the fact is that he put up a good season and 4 with what they had in the last 4 years. Pretty decent. If you're a Hamilton, if you're a Tiger Cats fan, you're okay with this selection compared to what you just gave up. It's great. But on Hamilton, sometimes you get better before it gets worse, before it gets somewhat better again. Now, Mike Jones left as a free agent with Edmonton this past offseason, so that branch is done. But what did they do with that third-round pick in 2015? They did not use it. They traded it. The following trade was the 24th overall pick and the 8th overall pick in 2015 to the Montreal Alouettes for Ryan Bauman. Now, I'm not going to say anything bad about Ryan Bauman because his time in Hamilton was good. He was used for primarily in a third and short packages, primarily, and actually scored a couple of touchdowns if my memory serves me correctly. And he was serviceable. And if you're looking back at right now, you're looking at the offensive lineman in Hamilton, the core as a whole. You could look back at the focal point. The moment that they signed or they traded for Ryan Bauman was the moment that they started to build around that offensive lineman. Guys like Brandon Boudreax learned from guys like him, as well as Tim Finley. Guys like Darius Sirocco learned around him. And then, of course, they added other vets like Chris Van Zyl. It's just that you can look back at this one trade that really solidified the Hamilton Tiger Cats offensive lineman to what we know today. But it was short-lived. And it wasn't short-lived, it was almost 2 years later. Ryan Bauman, plus a second-round pick in 2018, Jamal Robinson, 34th overall, as well as a 56th overall, was sent to the Montreal Alouettes. That's right, Ryan Bauman loves the Alouettes. In exchange for the 48th overall pick, the first overall pick in 2018, as well as the 10th overall pick in 2019. Now, one thing I like, as I said before, about Saskatchewan, because they made sure that when they made the trade, they had their assets to span over 3 years. You got the production in 2014 and the potential in 2015 and 2016. This is what Hamilton did. Hamilton got 3 assets. I mean, they gave up more, but they got the first overall pick plus an additional 2 assets. And they were not necessarily the latest, And in fact, they got a 10th overall pick from the year after that. So they got assets, potential assets, spanning over 2 years to go along with what they were already building in Steeltown. But it all goes into how it works out, how that relationship works out with those draft picks. And we're going to be talking about that now. First overall pick was used to select receiver Mark Chapman. Very, very high expectations coming out of college, going into the professional level. They just weren't able to come to terms with the rookie receiver. And as the negotiations progressed, and as they didn't come to terms, the longer it took, Mark Chapman said, yeah, I might not like football at all, and quickly kind of retired. So, what did they get for Ryan Bauman, Jamal Robinson, and a couple of draft picks for the first overall pick? Goose egg. Absolutely nothing. But there's still 2 other picks. What did they get with that 48th overall pick? They selected linebacker Mike Moore. Okay, so he's not with the team right now, but it was good enough for them to take that late in the draft, and they brought him back in 2018 to 2019 training camp. He just wasn't able to stick around. Unfortunately, still not with the roster, but I imagine at this point he's likely not going to stick with the CFL game anytime soon. Okay, we lost Mike Jones. Tell me something good. The Tiger Cats, with that 10th overall selection in 2019, selected Nikola Kalinic. Now, I kind of made reference to it on Twitter last night because he was a focal point in that first scoring drive in Hamilton last night. And while he didn't score the touchdown, he was a key cog in that, and it was really fun to actually see that live and to be like, hey, wait a minute, I'm talking about him literally in his trade tree. In his career prior to this season, it wasn't necessarily a great statistician. It was over 12 catches, 100 yards in the season, and as long as with a 31-yard touchdown. And I only mention that because it involved in a 64-14 drubbing of their provincial rivals, the Toronto Argonauts. And there, I'm back in the good graces of Hamilton Tiger Cats fans because they love mentioning that 64-14 game in 2019. So Nikola Kalinic still with the team. So if you're looking at, okay, so I'm okay with the Saskatchewan side of the trade, and it still exists. At the time, they probably got the better player, they got the more draft picks. Okay, it worked out. But I love what Hamilton did with this trade. They got 2 years out of Ryan Bauman, they got potential out of all the draft picks, and they got a use out of at least 2 of them. Yes, Mike Jones in the 3rd round, got 4 years of Mike Jones, and so far, a year and a bit out of Nikola Kalinic. When you're able to trade for an asset and get some use out of some of them, not all, but some of them, you nailed it. And while there's spans over a couple of GM regimes in Hamilton, you still have to grow some respect for the organization that are able to maintain that kind of consistency and somewhat of a moderate success out of your draft pick. So tell me how you feel. Hit the comments below. Make sure to hit like and subscribe. And if you have any future suggestions out of any future trade trees, hit them up on Twitter. I can be reached at Rouge Dalts. Podcast is at Rouge Radio. And of course, this video is powered by the Canadian Football Podcast Network. You can reach that CF Pod Network on Twitter.